Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to my live edition of The Law and You. I'm the attorney at law, Shellon Washington, your host, yours truly. Today, I will bring you a continuation of a topic we've started discussing before, and I just want to go a little bit deeper into this topic this afternoon. We will continue to discuss some of the factors and some of the reasons why the court makes decision as it relates to spousal support, not child support, spousal support. Let's continue this afternoon. I want to discuss a very important issue is as it relates to spousal support, which I believe a lot of people are unaware of because I've seen it happening often. And a lot of people have not considered this as a factor. Now, let's get back into the spousal support. I've already in a previous video, if you haven't watched my previous video, I would encourage you to go back and watch the last two videos, especially the one from last week, as I did discuss the prior week before also spousal support and some of the factors that the court take into consideration in determining whether or not to award your spousal support if you're going through a divorce or you're separated. And one of the things I did encourage people to do, if your spouse has left or your spouse is threatening to leave and your spouse has stopped supporting you, one of the things I tell people that you should always do is never leave your home until or unless your spouse is taken to court and sued for spousal support. Now, if you leave the home and you've lived on your own for a considerable amount of time, it is assumed that you're capable of supporting yourself. It's assumed that you don't need the support of that spouse. Or it could be very well that from the time you left to the time you approach the court for spousal support, your circumstances could have changed. And if your circumstances changed, then that kind of make things a little bit different in that at that point, you'll need your spouse to give some sort of support to you. But one things I want to discuss here briefly today, because as you know, this is a 30 minutes show. So I'm not here for a very long time. I'm here for this show is a very short time, and then I'm offline. So one of the things I want you to know is the length of the marriage. The length of the marriage is very important. I've had people come to me and they've only been married for 2 or 3 years and they're like, I need spousal support. No, that is not a significant amount of time, and it will not entitle you for a lengthy spousal support. And as I've said before, the guiding major factor is whether or not your spouse is self-supporting or has the ability to become self-supporting. Okay. So one of the things that is involved in this analysis is the length of the union, the age of the parties. Now, let's talk a little bit about the age of the parties, because this brings a big misconception. And oftentimes you'll see the husband is going to be the older one and the wife is going to be the youngest one. So oftentimes the wife is likely to be able to go back to school or do something to uplift herself and be able to go into the working field and become self-sufficient. But however, there are exceptions to that situation where the wife is the older party and the husband is the younger one. Now, if that should happen, then it's going to take a turn for the worse for the husband. I can tell you this up front. If the husband, for whatever reason, marries a woman that is older, the court is going to look into the ability of the parties to go back out into the work environment and to find suitable work, whether or not there's retirement assets, whether or not the parties let's say the husband was, during the marriage, the husband was working, the wife was working, and then the husband left and the wife was left with the responsibilities of the children, and it incapacitate her in terms of her ability to go and work. If taking care of your children hinders your ability to go out and take and look for work or keep yourself self-sufficient or self-supporting, guess what? Luck is on your side, because at that point the wife will be able to get much more in terms of spousal support from the husband, in addition to any child support that may be needed for any minor children or children who are still under the age of 23 years old and are in college. So that's a factor you need to take into account. Now, one of the things that is most important is the time and the money that one spouse has invested into the union. So, for instance, if a spouse has invested everything that they had into that union to buy properties, to support the children, to ensure that the home was functioning properly, and the husband was there just circling, running around with different women, because we know in reality these are the things that happens in marriage. Very often, you will find a man who will, and this, let me be very specific. I'm restricting this to the Black community because I don't know what goes on in the other community. And most of my clients are people from my community. So I can tell you by and large, I've seen it where there's multiple instances where, the husband is running around, he's with women, he's chasing after women, and the wife is in the home. I've had recent situations where I've represented clients like this. And I've also had recent situations where I've represented on the other side where the husband was. But I did mention before, I've seen one case, not necessarily my client, but I've seen one case where the court handed down a really rough deal to a husband who married a woman who was 20 years his senior. 20 years, guys. So in that case, guess what happened? The court calculated and gave her, there's no limit on the support that she got, and it's called a non-durational spousal support. So she was able to get a non-durational spousal support because, of course, the court analyzed all the factors, including whether or not she was able to go back into the work environment, whether or not she would be able to self-support herself during her retirement years, because there was a significant gap for the court to say, well, he's younger, he's more likely to continue to work in the working environment. So therefore, the court awarded her non-durational spousal support. There are other situations where, the court will say, well, okay, he would have to come back once his circumstances change. In that situation, that scenario with the 20 years difference, he had to go back once his circumstances changes and ask the court to modify, because obviously with a non-durational maintenance support order, non-durational support order, that is basically the lifetime of one of the parties. Most likely, it terminates at the death of the payer or the payee, or the marriage of the payee. If the payee decides that she wants to go and remarry another man, the law says that at that point it's no longer the ex-husband's responsibility to continue to support her. So obviously that support order shall terminate once there's a modification, or there's a change in circumstances. You go back to the court and you tell the court, well, my circumstances has changed. But let's get back to it. I want to make sure that people understand. The other thing is the health of the party, that the payer spouse, that is asking the court for maintenance, the health. The court's going to look at whether or not the party is the payee, the person who is receiving the money, the payee. The court's going to look to see whether the payee is of sufficiently good health. If the party is sick, like I've seen instances where the husband brought the wife to the United States, and then the wife got sick. She got really sick after they had their second child. And she really did not had any marketable skills. She can't work. She can't do anything. And he was trying to avoid his responsibility to paying spousal support, but that's his responsibility as a man. He brought a spouse to the United States that had no marketable skills. He made no efforts to send her out into the work environment. But then when she got sick, he was like, I'm out. I'm out. And we've seen this so many times. So I would say to all the men out there, if you're marrying somebody, take into account that they're not going to stay the same all their life. Neither are you. Because A lot of the times you see those husbands run out because the wife has some reason that she cannot copulate with the husband or whatever their situation is. And he runs out. And a lot of times the husband is even worse in his health condition than his wife is, or he himself has health conditions. So, these are factors the court's going to take into account, whether or not the wife or the person who's receiving the support is of good health, whether or not there's a possibility of them going back into the work market and looking for work, some sort of employment, or whether or not they would more likely to become a ward of the state. And if it's a case where the person is likely to become a ward of the state, the court is not having it. You will be responsible for supporting your husband or your wife that you choose to bring to the United States, knowing very well that person had no marketable skills to go out in the work environment, and that they don't have any assets themselves. So people might need to take into account that. I often heard somebody said, keep cheaper to keep her. Cheaper to keep her. I heard a client said that to me, cheaper to keep her. A lot of times it's cheaper for people to work their differences out than to part ways, because a lot of times you part ways and then you start feeling the sky comes down on you like a brick, like a ton of bricks all at once. And that is what happens in the case of spousal support, where the party or the spouse who is receiving the money, the payee who's receiving the money, cannot support, cannot become self-supporting. So that's something you need to consider. Another thing is, like I said, I did mention before, the earning capacity of each party. And this is based on your educational training. It's based on degrees, factors, experience in the work environment. There are cases where one party retired to stay home to take care of the children. And by the time they divorce, the earning capacity of the spouse, who, even though the spouse had a degree in education or whatever field they had it in, the earning capacity was diminished. Your earning capacity could actually be diminished by an activity, not using your degree, not working for a significant amount of time. There's a huge gap, in other words, in your resume. That's a factor that the court's going to take into account. Whether or not the party is able to quickly go back into the working field and assimilate very quickly and be able to earn an income that would be significant enough to make that spouse become self-supporting. That's another factor. There's instances where I saw there was a big gap not a big gap, it was a 13 years gap between the husband and the wife. The wife was 13 years younger. So she was able to get back into the working field pretty quickly and find a job, because during the marriage, she went back to school. She got herself a degree and in the medical field. And that's a field that easily you can be hired. But unfortunately, if it's not one of those fields that you can easily find work in, it poses a huge problem for the spouse who's required to comply with that support order. Okay, and I think one of the things that nails put the nails in the coffin for a lot of men is spousal support and child support going together. The two could become a really heavy weight. And I think a lot of them need to think very carefully. A lot of times people file divorces, but they don't consider the consequences of what they're doing. They just rush because they want to file the divorce. They believe that they're in the right and they believe that they're entitled to something. But I can tell you, in the case with that 20-year-old gap with the husband and the wife, the court awarded the wife the house. The court awarded her support. They had no children together. The court gave her every single thing. And what did he get? Zilch, nothing. He walked away with nothing because bad conduct, bad behavior during the marriage in terms of the finances, wasteful dissipation of marital assets is a factor that the court will weigh heavily against you in the state of New York. The court doesn't care if you cheat. The court doesn't care if you engage in an extramarital relationship. However, if you engage in that extramarital relationship is causing you to deplete funds that should have been used in your house. So for instance, you're taking $1,000 every week and you're going and stay at a hotel and spending the money on the woman or the man outside, that is going to be weighed heavily against that spouse as wasteful dissipation of marital assets. Because now you're not spending the assets in the house, you're spending the assets on any everything else. I've also seen another scenario where the husband received a hefty penalty from the court because he, again, infidelity, but rather than just engaging in infidelity, he was actually taking marital assets and spending it on his extramarital activities, extramarital affairs. So, but he wasn't, according to the wife's testimony, he wasn't putting any money in the house. So, based on her testimony, if the house needed repairs, she had to spend the money on that. If the children needed something, she had to spend money to do that. Everything, it was her, exclusively her and her and her. And the children and the husband, I'm sorry, the husband was not really involved in doing anything. In that case, clearly, there's an understanding that the husband is not involved in his home. It's a one-sided transaction. Guys, remember, a marriage is a contractual transaction where two parties come together. In this country, in the United States, it's like a business transaction. So you get out what you put in. And a lot of times, people don't put anything in and they expect the court to give them everything. But it's a big disappointment and a shock to a lot of people when they realize that a lot of times it's not that simple. What you put in is actually what you're going to get out. So you don't think that for 1 second that you're going to enter into a relationship with a spouse who is putting everything into the marriage, including paying more than 80% of all the bills, all the expenses, and you barely put in 10% and you expect to get 50%. It would not happen, especially in the context of a man. A man is expected to pull the responsibilities of his home. And as you guys know, this doesn't happen in our society. And there are instances where I see men haven't put anything much and they want everything going out. And the court usually says, not that easy. You're not going to get it because the wife is mostly the one left with the children, with the responsibility of catering to the children. And as you guys know, it's impossible for a woman to take care of a household with children and still focus on her career. So not that simple as most of these men somehow concoct in their mind. I've seen a situation with a client in Guyana. The client has explained that the husband's not doing anything. He's a drunkard. All he does is consume alcohol. And she wants a divorce because she feels like she's being pressured. She's carrying around this burden of taking care of this man. And I've seen this in our society is a lot of women in the Black community taking care of husbands. And we don't need that anymore in the Black community. It has to be balanced. There has to be some sort of balance. These women ought to teach their sons to be balanced and to pull their responsibilities as a man and don't leave it to the woman. And if they do, they must understand that when you're leaving that marriage, you take only what you've put in. It's not good. It's not a good look for a man to want anything that a woman has labored for, and it's vice versa. But if a man has taken care of a woman, she's expecting that when she's leaving or when he chooses to leave the marriage, that he must compensate her for the time. Because a lot of times, to be honest with you, people need to be compensated for their pain and suffering. I've seen a lot of times people ask me, oh, could we do something about this? This person's put me through a lot of torture. They've put me through a lot of pain during this marriage. But we don't have torts in a marital relationship when you're suing for divorce in New York. But New Jersey has marital tort. You can actually sue the spouse for marital tort in New Jersey. You could sue them for pain and suffering. You can sue them for a number of things that they've caused you during the marriage. Headache, pain and suffering. You can literally bring a tortious claim against your spouse in addition to your divorce action in the state of New Jersey. So if somebody literally tortured you all your life, all your years of the marriage, let's say you've been married for 10, 15, 20 years and all you've received is torture, abuse, mental, physical, psychological abuse. Fortunately for you, if you live in the state of New Jersey, you will be able to file a marital tort claim against your partner when you're exiting that relationship. So I think New Jersey law is pretty fair. I mean, if I were some people and I'm getting divorced, I want to be in New Jersey, right? Because all the suffering that person put you through, you can very well be compensated for it. But in New York, not so much. If you're divorcing in New York and your partner put you through mental distress, put you through pain and suffering and torture, there's no compensation for that. You have to walk out that marriage with none of these things to be compensated for. I've seen a lot of cases where people become angry, and I tell people, don't get angry in a relationship where you've been mistreated and the person wants to leave. Let them leave, and thank God that you still have your health. You still have your mental health. You're still alive, right? But fortunately for those in New Jersey, there is there is marital tort. So you can actually get some sort of recourse against that man or that woman. You know, in one instance I saw a client. He was literally stressed out. His wife was bringing the man into their apartment. She was having a good time. She was mentally putting torture on this man. And he did not know that all he had to do was file a divorce and make claims for marital torts against this woman to be compensated. Bear in mind, guys, in order to be compensated for marital tort, you have to basically have that party that you're suing has to have assets. If they don't have assets to compensate you for the marital tort, it doesn't even make any sense. You got to be able to get compensation. If you can get compensation, then trust me, New Jersey is the state you would like to be if you want to get a divorce from a spouse. You understand? That's the state you want to go to and live in if you have an abusive spouse that abuses you mentally, physically, psychologically. You can do that. And a lot of ways to prove that type of abuse. I mean, people's children generally don't want to testify in a divorce proceeding, but you got family members, you got friends who would have witnessed this thing, or in some cases, you know, like a lot of spouses who are in the military, or so they would have applied for what is called a they would have applied for VA benefits. So disability benefits is one of the ways, because they would have had to swear to certain documents and file certain documents with the government, telling the government some of the things that has affected them. And a lot of people has PTSD, not just people from the military, they has PTSD. And those are some of the things that affect people in their marriages. So when they take those things over to a marriage, you can easily use it as evidence to prove your marital tort case against that spouse, and you will get heftily compensated. So guys, just remember, the factors that the court is going to take, and I want you to bear in mind the age too. The age is not just go, it just doesn't go just one way, because let's say both of the parties are the same age. The people are divorcing at the age of 65. But if they're divorcing at the age of 65, let's say by that time, the wife was being supported by the husband almost exclusively. The court is going to weigh heavily to the fact that a 65-year-old woman is unlikely to need to go back into the work field or to go back to school. And then she's going to get support depending on the length of the marriage. The court's more likely to award her maybe non-durational support, some sort of support that will give her the ability to be able to live and at the same standard of living that she was at prior to the divorce. And just bear in mind that anything I say, it goes both ways to men and women, because there are women who also suffer from PTSD by virtue of being in the military or whatever. There are women like that. I do know a few cases like that where the woman was suffering from some sort of PTSD, and she did seek compensation from the VA. And guys, just so you know, all the government, any information, anything regarding a spouse's health, whether or not they suffer from mental illness, and they saw a doctor and they got treated, all that information could be accessible by a subpoena in any divorce proceeding. You can have your attorney subpoena that evidence, and once that evidence is subpoenaed, it will be a part of you can have it as a trial record, because once you subpoena it, you could get it into the court as certified medical records. And if you get certified medical records, you do not need a doctor to come then and testify that, yes, I did treat this patient and he or she did have medical issues, they have psychological, mental, or some sort of other type of issue. But that's I tell you, the tort part is the most appealing thing to most people, because that gives you, for those people who like to seek revenge. I don't advocate for revenge because I'm one of those people who believe in turning the other cheek. But if you are the person who like revenge because you're thinking is no way you're going to let somebody treat you a particular way and turn the other cheek, then the marital tort is a good option for you to sue that person for all the stress, all the mental anguish, and everything that they've put you through during that marriage. Sue the heck out of them if they have assets, and take what you're entitled to. Take everything for all I care, because a lot of people in certain profession has this type of issue. They have mental issues, and it's known that mental issues affect the quality of a marriage. It doesn't even need, it's not a situation that needs to be tried. It's a situation that, is obvious to the regular average person. It's a situation that, and don't be upset if somebody's listening to this and they have mental issue and they are seeking a divorce. You shouldn't be upset, because if you've caused your partner any sort of anguish, stress, or anything during the marriage, and you live in the state that allows it, what I would suggest is that if you know that you have a mental problem that prohibits you from having a certain quality of life with a person, don't live with anyone. Just date people. Don't get married, because if you do and you live in a state that permits marital torts, then you'll be in a lot of trouble. Otherwise, guys, I think it's always a good idea, as I've always advocated on my show, before you even think about marrying anyone, to get yourself a prenuptial. And the prenuptial will state that in the event of a divorce, the party is not entitled to maintenance or any type of support from you, and vice versa. You're not entitled to the same from them. But if perhaps you jumped into a marriage without doing that, and you committed several marital torts, guys, you're in trouble. But for those who are on the other side, who are capable of getting compensated, then you might be deserving of some sort of compensation if you are put in a situation where it was adversarial for the duration of your marriage. All right, guys. One other thing which I wanted to tell you, like, if there's investment income available to the parties, like if the spouse who's supposed to be paid has some sort of investment, that might help to alleviate your responsibility a little bit, but not a whole lot, because the standard again is the ability of that spouse to be self-supporting, be able to pull their own weight, be able to stand on their own feet, and not become a ward of the state in which they're living in. Okay, so I would encourage all of you who have issues, or you intend to go through a divorce, or you intend to go through whatever it is, to make sure that you take the right steps to avoid an issue. Or if you can't take the right steps, guys, you can always give my office a call. My phone number is across the screen that you see it there, 718-877-3100. You can call Washington Law Firm at any time if you need legal advice, or you have a problem. You think you might have a problem that you need help with, legal help, give us a call. The office is at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. So give us a call if you believe you have a problem and you're in need of legal help. We are open. Remember, we're available to take your calls and any issue, but we do not take walk-in. It's free consultation. You get a free 15 minutes consultation. After that, there's a fee, but it's a free 15 minutes consultation is available to everyone. So give us a call. And then if you want me to keep bringing this content to you every week, press the like button and share this video if you would like us to continue to bring you content that you can understand your rights as a litigant, or your family, whoever you might have that might need legal service. Continue to share the live and continue to press the like button. Thank you guys so much for staying with me for the half an hour today. So I will be back again next Saturday at 4 p.m. Thank you guys, and do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.